Welcome to Strength in the Numbers. My name is Andrew Codd, accountant, author, and commercial finance entrepreneur, and it's my job each week to bring you leaders in finance and business and deconstruct with them their real stories, insights, and hard-won lessons into practical advice on the key strengths and qualities you need to remain relevant in accounting and finance today, as well as the steps you can begin to take to elevate the impact you make to have a fun, successful, and rewarding career in accounting and finance. Now let's go over to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Strength in the Numbers. Now, with finance professionals being told by our leaders to be more like consultants, where should we start on such a request or journey? So rather than guess an answer, why not invite an expert guest mentor onto our show? So I had a brilliant opportunity to interview the highly in-demand Rakesh Sangani, who's the CEO and founder of Proservartner. And in this episode, Rakesh helps us deconstruct what Practitioner-Led Consulting looks like. He addresses the bad reputation that some consultants have and actually outlines 3 ways as finance professionals we can do it better. There's a reason why I get on so well with Rakesh on the episode, and also why he's in such high demand across many conferences and speaking events in finance in the US, Europe, and in Asia, because we go on to deconstruct things like the concept of a low-cost, quick and dirty experimentation approach for finance professionals, and also the importance of overcoming our fear of getting things wrong, why it's actually easy for us to be cynical of the digitalization that's coming into finance, and how to actually successfully bring it in on board, and also 6 questions on how to operationalise a more useful vision for finance so we have meaningful careers and remain relevant within our organisations. So look, hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please check out our timestamp show notes, key quotes, resources, and ways to connect with Rakesh at sitnshow.com. And look, really appreciate you investing your time with us today. And if you enjoyed the show, please let your friends and colleagues know about it. We're on all the major platforms. They can subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And that's enough for me. So without further ado, over to Rakesh and the show. So Rakesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm really pleased to have been invited. So really excited by this opportunity.
Rakesh, it's great to have you on. You're a guy who's very much in demand. I loved listening to your presentations at the Future Finance Summit as well. So we've had a few occasions to chat previously, but our audience could probably do with getting to know you a bit better first. So would you mind maybe sharing with us your story and your career in finance?
Sure. I've been on finance for quite some time. I started as an auditor with Arthur Andersen, who unfortunately are no longer with us. Great organization at the time. Really enjoyed my time there. However, I probably didn't enjoy auditing as much as the other things within finance that you could do. So qualified as a chartered accountant and moved very quickly from audit into consulting. So worked throughout my career with the likes of Deloitte. Then obviously I was missing the Andersen culture. So worked at Accenture up to kind of senior executive, working within their BPO and shared services and finance transformation, consulting and outsourcing practice. So after those experiences, I recognized that when I looked at the consulting market, there was a real gap. There was lots of organizations that had a pyramid model for consulting, where they were offering maybe people with less experience delivering finance practitioner type services. And we felt there was a market where we could invert the pyramid and become more of a practitioner-led organization. So back in 2008, I founded Proservartner, which was very much focused on being that practitioner-led, pragmatic, specialist consulting that we felt was missing in the marketplace at the time, really to provide smaller teams, focused advice to deliver on what's needed within that area, instead of throwing maybe 15 to 20 graduates at a problem. So it's a different way of looking at some of the problems that finance organizations face. And really since 2008, where I guess we focused more on the people and process side of finance transformation. I think most recently, in the last 2 to 3 years especially, our focus has been much more on digitalization. And I've been working on a range of digital projects around bringing the finance function into the world of robotics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence.
Okay, and that's what really fascinated me about the presentation, Rakesh, that you were giving at the Future of Finance Summit. Now, there's a few things in your journey I'd love to jump into. The first one is this sort of idea of practitioner-led, because I think it's something close to my heart and the people I tend to work with. And I also like the fact you inverted the pyramid. I did that in my book because I thought it's just a different way of looking at it, turning it upside down, that traditional view.
Right.
I mean, how does that practitioner-led approach help the people you work with better? Because, and the reason why I ask this is a lot of us are being told in finance, be more like consultants, but there's a certain type of consultant that probably we could do better in finance than sort of your traditional type. So I'd love to understand this practitioner-led approach you take a bit better.
Yeah, I think it's really important. So if I take a real life example, which I'm sure many of your listeners would have gone through, is something like process mapping, right? So if you're carrying out process mapping to understand your finance processes better, one approach is bring in maybe one of the big four, and if you've got these maybe graduates supporting this type of activity, they don't really understand the responses and they don't really understand the processes. So you end up actually in the improvement stage, maybe not getting all of the insight from the people that you're talking to, and B, all of the improvements that you could achieve. Now, I think it makes and I think C, in addition to that, there's a credibility factor when it can be frustrating for the subject matter expert speaking to a consultant that doesn't really understand what they do. So I think there's certainly value in having someone with, that finance background, that knowledge of how it works, and experience of the role that finance plays within an organization to support organizations in a different way. So again, if we take that process mapping, it's really being able to build the right relationship with the SMEs so they open up. Instead of telling you what they should be doing, they tell you what they actually are doing.
Which is, it's a key distinction.
And in addition to that, I think it's also able to bring it to life with real world experiences and identifying improvements at a very pragmatic level. So that's just an example. And if you apply that, I think that applies across a range of different types of transformations that you could adopt. To your point, is interesting, finance people being told to act more as consultants. I think generally consultants have a bad reputation. You always hear the story around the consultant will look at your watch and tell you what time it is. I think generally there's different types of consultants. There's the ones that maybe just listen too much and play back what they're listening to and just document that and show that to senior management. There's the other type who just have a boilerplate and drive you to that final answer and don't listen at all. And I think in reality, you need that balance of the two. And I think that's relevant for finance practitioners, because I think when organizations say be more like a consultant, it's really around bringing in best practice, but also contextualizing it and listening to the environment and adapting it so that it works for that environment. And I would say that's where we play. And I don't think you can achieve that with people who are just straight out of university, I'm afraid. So our model is we only hire people with a minimum of 7 years to 10 years of finance experience.
Yeah, it does. I'm sorry to say for our younger listeners or sort of newer into finance, it does take a period of time to get to that sort of practitioner status, because unfortunately you have to sometimes make a few mistakes to learn what works and what doesn't. But Rakesh, I think what you've given is really great advice for more of us that are a bit more seasoned in terms of how we go and become more that practitioner type of consultant. And I really loved how you gave the different extremes that we should avoid and try and find somewhere in between. I suppose for our younger listeners, is there sort of any steps, constructive steps, that would accelerate their journey to becoming better practitioner type consultants that you could recommend them follow?
Yeah, I think with the for the younger listeners, one is around experience. Certainly, I think experience counts for a lot, and take the opportunities to learn about new things. So finance is undertaking so much change at the moment with the onset of robotics and automation and how that's changing finance, with many companies already adopted lean and Six Sigma techniques, and with new skills being desired. I think there's lots of opportunities in finance. So I think for the younger listeners, I would say don't be afraid to get involved in new things. I think you can always look at something you've never done and be a little bit concerned or almost scared around taking on something new. And I think especially for the younger listeners, throw yourselves into those things, because those skills that you could develop in areas that might be more niche in finance will be critical in the future.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And you did mention digitalization, Rakesh. I have to say, I don't even know where to start that conversation, because there just seems to be so much going on. Like, as someone like close to your, similarly close to my heart was process and people. That's tended how I tended to work over the years. But in terms of now going forward, how do we get a handle on digitalization, and more importantly, what's relevant and what's less relevant about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I too, similar to yourself, I'm a people and process person. So I have to say, this whole onset of digitalization I found fascinating. And I've gone through a bit of a journey myself. I was very cynical at the start. So,
Yeah.
as I think many finance people are, there's lots of talk around, oh, we can automate the whole finance function through robots. 35% of jobs in the UK will be lost to robots in the next 4 years. And there's a lot of hype around the topic. And that really made me, I think, quite resistant around it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think after, in the last 3 years, where I personally gained more and more experience, and we have as an organization, you recognize that if leveraged in the right places, in the right ways, then robotics, some of the machine learning stuff, some of the artificial intelligence out there is really impressive, and it can provide real tangible value within the finance function. So I think the problem we have today around digitalization is that there's just so much technology out there today.
Yeah.
We have ERPs, obviously, and some organizations want to just optimize their ERPs. We have process enabling technologies like High Radius, Basware, Blackline, those types of tools, which are kind of off-the-shelf tools that you could leverage. We have macros that you could create at the other end of the spectrum. You've got robotics, you've got business process management technology, you've got machine learning, you have artificial intelligence, you have all of these different types of technology. And I think as a finance user, it's really difficult to understand where you should start. And I think that's where we come in, because what we're trying to do is really demystify some of the BS, from want of a better word, around the space, to become very practical around, well, if you're using OCR today, maybe you should look at a different tool, because there's artificial intelligence tools that increase your accuracy of OCR from what was historically maybe 70-80% towards 95%. And if you're doing lots of repetitive manual activities, maybe you should look at a robotic process automation solution. So what we're trying to do is really demystify that stuff, so it's very practical. And I think it's also a change of how you bring on technology. I think growing up in finance functions, organizations would typically go through a assessment phase, a design phase, which could last up to kind of 6 to 9 months. And I think that needs to change as well. And leading organizations today are doing more kind of proof of concepts. Well, they'll go through 8 to 12 week quick and dirty. Does this technology work in our organization? And if it does, then to scale it up. And I think that's also a change in some of the behaviors that finance functions have historically adopted and ways of working they've adopted, changing to meet this fast growing and fast changing digital world.
That's very interesting. You know, these sort of 8 to 12 week quick and dirties. Like, are they like? I have to say, I can sort of picture it being done myself. I mean, do you think it's becoming more standard practice, or is it something that we should be embracing more of, just to get a sense of whether these things work or not?
Yeah, I think we should be, well, I wouldn't say standard practice yet. I think we should
Okay.
definitely be embracing those types of concepts more and more. It's the whole concept of experimentation. So if you look at Facebook and Amazon's of the world, they're running 50,000 experiments a day, trying out lots of different things because they see it as critical to their growth. And I think in finance, sometimes we don't like to experiment because of the
Yeah.
fear of getting
Oh,
things
yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Oh, that is
uh,
so true. I'm glad I'm not the only person that feels like that, Rakesh. I mean, it's like, the business looks to us to be accurate, and so failure doesn't really come naturally to us. But that's the
exactly.
case with experimentation. You win and you lose sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you have to have that mindset to begin with, which is okay. We're going to do this low cost, quick and dirty proof of concept. It may succeed, it may fail, but at least we'll know whether this technology fits our organization to solve a particular business problem. But I think we see different types of organizations at the moment. Some that are embracing that, I think they'll do very well, but some that are still very scared of failure and scared of doing a proof of concept for a new technology and would rather go through that 6 to 9 month assessment phase.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what, I got to take encouragement from this thing I worked out the other day, that I looked at the time difference between the foundation of double entry bookkeeping to the evolution of spreadsheets, and then from the evolution of spreadsheets to robotic process automation. And I uncovered that we've moved from spreadsheets to robotic process automation in 1/20th the time it took us to move from double entry to spreadsheets.
Excellent.
So yeah, we're getting better. We're getting faster, but
But we start from a low base.
there we exactly what I said. So there's no excuses for actually making some inroads here, right? We're starting from a
Yeah.
low base, and we can really make a difference by embracing some of the digitalization. Look, Rakesh, I think that was fantastic advice. I suppose, look, the clients, your customers you're working with have a number of different challenges, but I guess what's exciting you most about your current work?
Yeah, I think currently what's exciting me is, we've been harking on around understanding why you exist as a finance function and having a clear strategy for finance. And that's one thing that's really exciting me in today's market. We are seeing that resonate a lot more today with organizations working out what type of finance function they need and whether they have the right skills, whether they have the right organizational model, the right operating framework, the right vision as well, in order to kind of pull that together. So for me, that's quite exciting work that we're doing, really, to help finance functions think of where they are now and where they want to be in the future.
That's really interesting, because I've always had the sense of finance we're being quite reactive, and like, how much time are we really putting into thinking about being proactive and being strategic, even though it's the right thing, and we probably end up advising the business to do this. I mean, it's about time we took some of our own medicine. So maybe what sort of things could our audience consider to start maybe thinking of a better vision, or a more right vision for our existence to continue?
Yeah, I think when we carry out this type of vision and strategy work, we're in essence asking 6 questions for the finance function. We're asking, why does it exist? Why does finance exist today? What is the purpose of finance? And that's a really important question, because If you don't answer that question, then the rest of the business is expecting the finance function to do a lot of things. They're expecting the finance function to be innovative, to have high internal customer satisfaction, to reduce cost, to have continuous improvement, to have the best processes, to have a great control environment, to standardize processes and ways of working, to have engaged people that want to work at the company and are really excited about those opportunities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The demands of finance become a little bit unrealistic because suddenly you have to deliver on all of these things. So I think more and more finance functions are realizing, okay, it's impossible to try and do everything. And what we need to do is prioritize. What we need to do is stand for something. And that's really the why is, are we the finance function that is going to be a business partner and provide strategic business value to the rest of the organization? Or are we the finance function that's just going to be performed at lowest cost? And it's really understanding where finance plays in that spectrum. So that why is important, and that's really the first element that we would go through. And then supporting that why with a set of really clear objectives and measures of what does success look like? What does the success of the finance function look like? And then also understanding your customers in finance. So if we talk about business partnering, who are the customers? How do we negotiate ourselves around this organization that we sit in and make sure that finance is a valuable service? So that who is really important, and really, understanding what is their perception today. So I don't know how many of your listeners have embarked on a customer satisfaction survey to get the opinions of the stakeholders within the organization of how finance is performing. But I think that's a very important thing to do, to really get a view of whether our measure of good is consistent with what our internal customers think of us.
100%.
Then the third component is kind of the what. We're big believers of having a very clear finance taxonomy. So define finance in that 120 odd processes that it stands for. So and because you have to answer these questions. You have to answer the question of, does payroll sit in finance or does it sit in HR? And I'm not sure it matters, or both. But I think you have to define it for your organization. And also, things like sales order processing. Does that sit in customer services or does that sit in finance? So it's really important to define, what are those processes that make up finance, and then to establish exactly what roles do they relate to. So which of these are kind of corporate roles around strategy, direction, and leadership? Which of these are around, roles that relate to business partnering? Which of these are centers of expertise? And then which of these are more transactional by nature and supportive and could be done anywhere, versus the ones that are more required to be in a particular location because of regulatory legal requirements? So I think building that what is then important. Then the next question you try and answer is the how. So you built your vision for finance. Well, how the hell do you get there? So what do you need in terms of technology? What do you need in terms of governance models? What do you need in terms of mandate from your leadership team to enable finance to get there? And then I think the last two questions are really the where and the when. The where is, well, where should we be based from a finance perspective? Should we be centralized? Should we be decentralized? Should we have shared services in place? Should we be part of something bigger? Or should it just be close to the CFO? I think that where is really important. How do we deal with, the whole onset of remote working and having a workforce that maybe doesn't want to come into the office every day? And, do we encourage that? Do we embrace that? Or actually, should we discourage that? So I think there's some big questions around where, and then it's really around building a roadmap to help get you there. so that piece of work is what we call kind of the vision and strategy of the finance function. And I'm really excited because we see more and more organizations now embracing that, and moving away from the reactivity that they used to have to being a little bit more proactive today.
Actually, I mean, I just think that's a great thing. I think it's just more meaningful work if we're more on the front foot rather than guessing all the time. And you know what? That's really encouraging that you feel that that's going on and you see that, Rakesh, because there's fundamentally simple questions, but maybe we've just been guilty because we've been busy thinking we're doing the right thing by serving the business and reacting all the time, that we're obviously doing the right thing. But doing the right thing really is having a strategy and vision, knowing what we stand for, going through the why, the who, the what, the how, the when, and the where, and then I think we should be able to stand over that and say, yeah, we should be providing value to the organization that way and creating value for them. And what a great framework! And thank you for that great advice, distilling it for us. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Rakesh, you've given us so much great advice there. I was curious, what's been the best bit of advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's a great question. I think for me, the best piece of advice I received was based on an African proverb, actually.
All right.
Which was, if you want to go fast, go it alone. But if you want to go far, make sure you do it together.
Wow.
And that really resonated with me because I think early on in my career, when I wanted to achieve something at pace, I would not always involve all of the people around me because I felt they were maybe not able to operate at the same pace, and that would frustrate me, and I would want to get things moving and move things forward. So I think that advice really helped me, because I recognize actually by taking that approach, I can only go so far. And by taking the team and in a broader sense organizations with you when you go through this journey, I think that becomes a lot more powerful. And I think I've taken that into my work as well. So when we talk to finance leaders, it's also around involving the business to make sure that they take the whole organization across a finance change program, rather than just finance trying to go it alone. So that's probably the best piece of advice I ever received.
It's very powerful, and it really, when you said that, really resonated with me too, Rakesh. I think I would have had a much easier life if I'd realised the importance of moving together as to alone when I started out in finance. It may seem efficient at the time, but if you want effectiveness over the long run, collaboration, bringing people along with you, and helping people achieve their potential will only deserve to accelerate towards the end game.
Exactly. You can only go so far if you try and go it alone, and I think that was a good learning for me early on in my career.
Yeah, no, I just wish I had that bit of advice sooner myself. so thanks, Rakesh. And I suppose, continuing with that theme, are there any sort of resources you tend to go to, any books that you might recommend our audience check out that might help them on their journey?
Great question. So I think I'm a big reader of strategy books, because I think a lot of what can be applied in terms of growing small businesses to big businesses also apply to change environments for finance functions. So I would recommend, books wise, Good to Great, I think is a great book, and Traction. So those are two resources that I think I've leveraged. But I think the other resources, and probably the most important one for me, is building a network of people that you can trust and rely on, and actually listening to that network. So personally, I have a couple of coaches that I use, but I also talk to people and understand what they're going through, but also how some of our approaches and my personal approaches, how they've impacted people. So I think I'm always learning, So I would encourage a bit of book reading. I would definitely encourage getting yourself a coach. So I think even in your finance careers, to take, no matter how experienced you are, I think a coach can add so much value in helping you understand, different concepts, different ways of working, and also the impact of some of the things that you may do that you think are the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think look, and again, I think like the other guest mentors that have come onto the show, Rakesh, you've shared some really great advice that get people a lot of the way. But I do feel that having a coach will give listeners that added benefit, and focus. That, as much as I think the podcasts are great and whatever, I have to say that obviously because we found them and do them, and they are brilliant. But no, I do think that's a very important point you make about a coach, and I really appreciate you being open enough to share that with our audience.
Yeah, I think again, it's very easy to be running in a particular direction without stopping to look around every once in a while. So I think having a coach, as much as they're providing you with some external insight, is also stopping and really thinking about where you are in your career, what you're doing, how you're approaching things, and assessing, actually, rather than making the same mistakes again, are there things that you could be doing differently? So yeah, I find that always, as we hark on about continuous improvement in terms of processes. I think having a coach is a real important way of continually improving yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think all the best athletes in the world, if you want to get any meaningful return from their investment of time and effort, I think they all have coaches.
Exactly.
I'd be surprised if none of them did. So
exactly, treat yourself as a high performance athlete.
Yeah, I wish I did that with my eating and my diet. I have some ways to go.
So, you and me both, man.
Yeah, I said it's probably, I always use the excuses in finance, so coffee and high sugar diet. But I need to improve there. So and I do think a coach would help. So thanks, Rakesh. And look, really appreciate what you've shared there. And if our audience wish to continue the conversation further, how's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so they can connect with me via LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out. And then if you want my email address, just ask for it. And happy to set up a conversation if it works.
Excellent, thanks, Rakesh. Yeah, I love the little tidbits you throw out there on LinkedIn. Last one about the 5 prediction of RPA was very controversial, got a lot of comments and likes. So I thoroughly recommend our audience definitely go check out your profile and your posts. And I suppose in terms of, before we wrap up, would you have any other parting thoughts for our audience?
I think just before we wrap up, I think the only parting thought I would have, just repeating something I said earlier, finance is undertaking so much change. It's really important to not be afraid of maybe some of the ambiguity that you may find, because I think to be successful in finance in the future, you really need to have a mentality around better never stops, and look to improve the ways of working across the finance function, but also the rest of the business. So I think my parting words would be better never stops in finance.
What a great way to wrap the show up, Rakesh. So thank you for doing that. And again, thank you for going through the background between practitioner-led consulting and the differences between the traditional. I love the way you flipped the pyramid up on its head. The chat we had about digitalization, and also breaking down the strategy and vision that more of us are embracing into those sort of 6 key questions. So really enjoyed having you on the show today. Thanks for investing your time with us.
My pleasure, Andrew.
So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to know more about our guests today, their bio, and follow up on the resources mentioned during the show, you can find all the relevant links and more at sitnshow.com. There you'll also be able to get access to earlier shows, read the latest blogs, There's also an opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter, which will give you heads up as to when the next show is coming out, latest events, news, and anything that's going to be relevant to help you have a fun, rewarding, and successful career in finance and accounting. And just before you go, we really appreciate your feedback. If there's something we can do better on the show, something that's not working, or something you'd like to see, even a guest you'd like for us to invite onto the show, someone who you think might be able to benefit you more and also the rest of our community, please let me know. You can email me. I'm at andrew@sitnshow.com, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just drop me a message so I know how you found me and we can connect. And really, it's our community that'll make the show. If we keep engaging and driving each other on, we'll keep on building our strength in the numbers. When all is said and done, if we can do the numbers better and finance better, we'll create more opportunities for ourselves, our friends, our families, our communities, and our businesses. So until next time, have a good rest of the week, take care, and let's keep building our strength in the numbers.